All right, Professor Doctor.
Professor Doctor. Oh,
Professor
oh
Doctor.
boy.
Sorry, I think it started as a Freud joke because that's one of the American translations for Freud. It says Professor Doctor Sigmund Freud, which is like a nice, funny, verbose title. And I always thought it was apropos because I'm always learning from Professor Doctor Bones.
Oh well. If anything, maybe I'll do like a Doctor, Reverend. You could throw some of those other made-up names you see in those weird churches, like Apostle, Prophet. All this sort of. If anything, I just want to be blessed and a part of one of those churches that holds snakes and jibber jabbers along and runs demons out of people.
The
Good shit.
blessed Reverend Doctor Bones.
There you go. That sound. Yep. Totally doesn't sound like I have a cult full of guns in the Everglades. Yeah, that's that's exactly what that is.
So we are going to talk about unions.
Yeah.
And specifically, what are the compositions of unions, and what is the moral composition of unions that sort of makes a union no longer a union? So one of the things I wanted to ask you is the relationship between unions, sort of Christian morality, maybe some roots in sort of brotherly love that sort of get exploited by the ruling class, and how that happens. And we were talking a little bit, maybe your answer will make up for the vagueness of how I'm putting the question. But I think I asked the question beforehand, so.
All right. Well, the egoist critique of unions shares a lot of room with the egoist critique of society, i.e., the minute that it becomes something that you live for rather than a tool for you to use in your own life, you have a fucking problem. So, for instance, we can look at the history of labor unions in the United States, some of the larger labor unions who routinely scabbed on other unions. If let's say the Teamsters were on strike, other unions, because they didn't want to join in, would roll over their picket lines, and they told their members, even if their members didn't think it was right, oh well, we got to remain strong, we got to do this, that, and the other. You had American unions during the breakdown of unions sort of tell the workers, look, we have to take these sacrifices, we have to accept these changes. Yes, all our benefits are getting rolled back, but we've got to do it to survive. Whereas let's compare that with the sort of militancy we saw in France in the 1960s or even after, where workers, when someone says they're going to close down a factory, they kidnap their boss, beat the shit out of them, and then threaten to blow the factory to hell. Yes. So where that stems in is there is this very interesting two things, really. One, you have a very clear idea that this organization, the union, or at sometimes the larger working class, is an existent entity that is more real than you. And therefore, its desires and its objectives are more important than your own. So your life can be sacrificed, your own needs can go unmet, as long as this other larger thing is benefiting, i.e. usually the union hierarchy, and you're told that it's all for your own good. This violates your self-interest. Secondly, we have this sort of very real Christian morality, which Stirner wrote about extensively. The idea that you can have a group of workers who can be denied basic rights, that their employer can basically determine whether they're out on the street or not at a moment's notice, fire them without any benefits, call in people to violently break up strikes. And somehow, these workers are supposed to respect the human rights of their employers, not harm them, not physically assault them, not take their property. The workers are told time and time again, not only by union heads, but some revolutionary leaders that, oh, this isn't the right way to do this. We've got to do this. We've got to do that. We've got to respect what these people are doing, or we have to be better than this. So in the end, the worker becomes, instead of liberating themselves as a worker, they become just another cog in a machine. You're trading out the capitalist machine for the union machine, which is really just a sort of pressure valve for the entire capitalist machine to roll on. And as we've seen in the United States now, once that pressure valve outlived its usefulness, all the sacrifices all these workers pulled off are worth nothing now.
So I want to, in Lacan, you look for the sort of surplus enjoyment. And I think there's a way to bring this to the union discussion that we're having is look who has the monopoly of force, or look where force is sort of being funneled. And if the force is out of the hands of the workers and sort of into the hands of these union bosses, or the force is sort of even given to the state fully. And I think one of the problems that anarchists had in, say, like Emma Goldman's time is, you know, the workers would gather, but they would sort of, they were very, I guess, passive in their own sort of resistance at times. So in terms of the anarchists' attempt to infuse day-to-day workers with that idea of force, that they can have this sort of force, is almost, that morality seeps back in immediately. And you were talking about the French unions in the 60s, that even today they'll still, you know, they understand that it's their job to destroy the factory, destroy the means of production. And I think this invisible tyranny of symbols, really, it's
that's exactly
so
what it is.
integrated into people's mindset, they can't even begin. So Lacan looked for surplus enjoyment, look for the force, look for the surplus. Where is the force in any system?
Yeah, exactly. Well, Stirner writes in the Ego in its own, you know, he says the egoist has another route, because Stirner has this very, very large critique of the socialists at the time, who we would recognize them now as sort of what we would refer to as state socialists. Now we're advocating this worker state, which really wasn't going to change much. But, you know, everybody said, hey, if the revolution happens, you know, it'll just get better on its own. Don't you think the people's police and the people's tax office and et cetera, it'll be better. But anywho, so Stirner says, the egoist suggests to the rabble, take what you require. Take it. Don't, you know, you're arguing with your boss over his ability to keep you alive. Why? As long as we're arguing with our boss over what amount of crumbs he's going to give us, we still remain slaves. We're still fucked. Stirner says, no. Take everything you want, everything you need, whether that's literally taking over a factory, whether it's liberating the wealth stolen from you by the wealthy, whatever you got to do, take it. And in fact, Stirner says, the minute humanity loses respect for property, all of humanity will be free. In the same way that when slaves no longer respect their masters as masters, they are free. The minute
that respect for property, it goes so much further than the property itself. And we were talking before in a previous episode about the mafia and learning from the mafia, and then some people wrote some comments like, oh, we're talking about the mafia, isn't that something? But I think a good way to look at it is, not every mafia is going to be in your self-interest, right?
Oh, fuck no.
And there's so it's almost, you have to look at it like a gang war. And if you have the management sort of gang, and then you have workers, and their workers are sort of, they're under this illusion that they're like, oh, we're going to be part of this manager gang. And it's like, to maybe some degree, maybe they'll recruit, oh yeah, here you go. There, now you're part of the manager gang. But the workers don't know how to become a gang that's separate. That's a separate.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And especially as long as they maintain themselves as workers, which, let's not forget, this is a historical anomaly. With the enclosure movement and everything like that, people think that we're, one of the things that confuses me a lot about a lot of Marxist thought is, talk of the workers. Yeah. Human beings aren't designed to be workers, okay? If you are anywhere in the world and you don't own the land underneath your feet, you don't own the ability to make your own money, and you kind of notice that your parents didn't either, you are part of a long-standing tradition that goes all the way back to the fucking enclosure movement, where a whole bunch of rich people came in, threw peasants off their land, beat the ever-living piss out of them, and then shoved them into fucking factories. People went from having more days off than work days a year to working in factories that had 16-hour days where whistling could get your jaw broken. This is not by accident. This is not a random assortment of historical amalgams that somehow made us workers. And frankly, being a worker is nothing to fucking be proud of. The sheer fact that we are exploited every day and hour by hour of our lives, that we should be doing what we want to do or spent in the service of someone else, doesn't mean it's a good thing. In the same way that if we have a union-controlled McDonald's, while sure, it's a little bit better than, straight-up capitalist exploitation, it still doesn't free you. As long as we are still determined by our economic conditions, as long as the economy still rules human lives, rather than human lives being served by the economy, we're still going to be fucked. And a lot of these unions preserve that social caste system. Now, there is some, the IWW is a great example of one that seeks the abolition of wage labor, but a burner would say, oh, this is wonderful, would be the solidarity networks like in Seattle. Now, what's so interesting about this tactically is the Seattle Solidarity Network, it's not made up of one workplace. Anybody can join, right? So you have workers from multiple workplaces. And if someone has a problem, they're not getting paid, the workers come out, maybe they picket that business. Maybe they go to that boss's home. They put pressure. But these workers aren't limited to their workplace. They're treated as individual human units. And so you have people from all over the city that can act in unison together to achieve better lives for themselves. Whereas sometimes the IWW gets hung up and fucked up because they're stuck fighting workplace by workplace, whereas a solidarity network, hey, who the fuck has a problem with their boss? Let's all get together and fucking bring some heat to these pieces of shit. And again, it doesn't necessarily have to be like, hey, let's pistol whip the local Taco Bell manager, which, I mean, is a good thing. I'm not going to say that's not a beneficial thing. I'm not going to say that I wouldn't be happy to just see managers getting pistol whipped all the time. But a great example was the Seattle Solidarity Network. This guy wasn't paying his dishwashers. They picketed his business. He didn't give a fuck. They, passed out flyers. He didn't give a fuck. Well, this asshole lived in a very, very posh community. So what these, people did was they went into this posh community, gated community. They got in there somehow with these buckets. And they found the guy's house and they started knocking on all the doors of his neighbors. And they said, so-and-so is having some money troubles. Clearly, he's having such financial difficulty, he can't afford to pay his dishwashers. We're out here collecting donations. Do you think you could help him out? So they brought this ultra shame to this rich fuck. Immediately after that, he started paying his workers. Now that's thinking as an individual, as a unique person, rather than limited, I am a worker, therefore all of my disputes must be met through this labor negotiation between me and my owner. No, fuck that. Do whatever you gotta do to get what the fuck you want. Because your employer, because the capitalists have been doing that since day one. And it's only the workers that have been tricked into thinking that they have to do something a certain way that keeps them exactly where they're at.
Yeah, I think a very flawed but important concept of left unity. I think it has this stupid sort of feeling to it when I say it, but it works at times, because part of what it could mean is you have the union organizations, you have the sort of more traditional Marxists, I suppose, along with these tactics that are not traditional Marxist tactics that are like hyper focused on legalism in terms of the actual sort of mechanisms of the state that sort of look down on any sort of anarchist tactical moves. But that what you're saying is sort of a great example of what I would consider a strategy that would incorporate traditional Marxists with anarchists.
Oh, with everybody. And that's the thing. And it fits in perfectly with Stirner's idea of the union of egoists. Because he said, unlike a society that you serve, the union of egoists is a sword for you to wield. This is something that adds to your power, not that you lend your power away to. This is something you can count on to extend your own force, that you can unite with other people of like minds to build up your strength. So this isn't limited to an individual workplace or anything. This is a thing that gets things done. It's also, while, I'm sure they have, reading and whatever, it's not a group that's sitting down every weekend putting $5 on the table and viciously masturbating to anything Lenin has written. This is about getting shit done. If you want to jack off to Lenin or Mao, there's plenty of like dirty, seedy peep shows, I'm sure, on the outskirts of Portland where the floor is dirty and sticky. I mean, it's just, oh, God, the smells one can imagine there as the dusty communist manifestos are picked up off the ground, just covered in semen. Yeah, it's a horrible thing, I've heard.
Oh, man.
Look, and that is God's truth. And if anybody thinks that is not happening right outside Portland and Seattle, may God strike Donald Trump dead.
For the record, Portland Marxists, me and Dr. Bones. I've not been shit talking with Dr. Bones. He just sort of put that out of the ether. I promise. It might sound like, oh, Elliot fed that to Dr. Bones, but I did not. No, but one of the sort of important things that you brought up is that people did not always live as workers or identify as workers, and people at one point had more time off than time working, right? So a lot of what I like about Stirner in the despooking sort of mechanism is it allows you to take these symbolic fictions that are so ingrained in day-to-day life, and it's almost sad because that's like such a trope. It's like, oh, you're all sheeple, but it's like okay, yes, there's the trope that says that. However, there's also the actual net, and what is the consistency and what is the nature of this sort of net. And you got your Christian morality, you got the sort of servitude, and you got them sort of linked together in a way that's so powerful that people think that a failing of, they're like, oh, well, my moral set involves sort of not being able to involve myself with sort of left politics of, oh, this is uncouth. But yeah, it's like it's uncouth because at this point, you know, a ruling sort of feudal society decided to take some stuff out of the Bible and make it into law and make it into morality, and now you have people saying, oh, this is my morality. It's like, okay. So it's important to not get caught up in that. And then Stirner says, you know, the man is different than the child because the man understands interests versus ideals. And I think it's kind of funny because that obviously is an ideal, but the point being, the interest, how to get people into self-interest is so difficult. It's such a fundamentally destructive concept.
Absolutely.
That is, like, I would say, the antithesis to Christian morality, which is the Christian moral set is do unto others, do unto others as you would like done to you. But hold on one second. Why not? Why is that better than do for yourself? It's because it creates this like nice symbolic net that allows people to distance themselves from their own things that they care about. And why is that? And for some reason, that is given a moral precedent over directly accessing what people need. So,
absolutely. And the funny thing is that's only peddled to the workers, because meanwhile, the people at the top, they do whatever the fuck they want often for their own self-interest. And later on, through the lens of history, we will excuse it away and do whatever. Again, another one of these things is that's not just in clear in Christian morality, but through the whole capitalist ideology and even a lot of Marxism, is this idea of a future heaven. The workers are told that, oh, don't worry, communism's coming. Oh boy, it's coming. Now we just have to eliminate every capitalist state on planet Earth. And until then, you're going to work in that fucking factory. I mean, I'm going to give you a house, but you better get your ass to work, you little piece of shit. But don't worry, if you don't, the people's cop is going to bust your ass. everything's put off, everything's farther. It's all about heaven. It's all about the rapture. Everybody's waiting for the grand event that never comes.
Yeah.
We're all so scared of doing anything that might endanger the second coming of Christ. I mean, Marx. I mean, Lenin. What? I get them confused. We're so worried about fucking up the second coming that we are literally living our lives not for ourselves. And again, you talked about, I think there is a gigantic fear of this because we have been bred and taught and everything like that, that, oh, humanity is this horrible, dark, evil thing that needs all these different rules and regulations. And it's all about original sin. You can dress it up however the fuck you want, but it's the straight up Catholic doctrine.
Yeah.
And so people are afraid of really acting for themselves. And we're taught that acting for yourselves is a selfish, terrible thing when that's not necessarily the case. And Stirner gives some great examples, or one example that I like that's not in the ego in its own, but I've found very powerful is like, if you throw a party, right, and you invite people over, I want them to have a good time. I absolutely want them to have a good time. Their enjoyment brings me enjoyment. I'm putting on this whole event for them to be happy. I wouldn't call it a sacrifice. If you're throwing a birthday party and you've got some bottle of booze and you want your friends to come over, you wouldn't say you're sacrificing for the benefit of your friends. No, you're enjoying yourself and you want to enjoy yourself with the people around you that you enjoy. That's self-interest. But we're tricked into thinking that self-interest is merely some Ayn Randian bullshit, which, again, as a side note, perfect example of how self-interest has been perverted in the American system. It's self-interest for a capitalist, whatever the fuck, to screw his workers over, build a railroad or whatever the fuck Ayn Rand's going about in between smoke and cigarettes.
Railroads.
Yeah. And somehow, self-interest. Well, hey, quick questions. What if the workers, gunned down all these motherfuckers and just took the railroads? Whoa, well, property rights. I don't know about. No, fuck that. Take self-interest all the way. Self-interest can be, I want to care for older people because I love these people. They make me happy. They've made me happy my entire life. I want to care for these people. That can be self-interest. Caring for your children and teaching them can be self-interest. The idea that building on our own unique selves rather than our economic labor as a worker or our individual case system that we had often no choice in is a much more liberating concept. When we look at the destruction of capitalism, not as the overthrow of one system that will rule us for another, and instead say, I deserve a better life. I deserve a better life. I want a life where I'm not working 40 hours. I want life to mean visiting places or painting or becoming my true authentic self. A life where Maslow's hierarchy of needs is really attainable and we aren't stuck scraping around on the bottom.
Yeah. I think you made a good point that who has that ideology is the people that are essentially using positions of power to step on the people in their employ, so it gets this reputation for when you're a worker, it's Christian morality, and then once you're the priest or once you're the boss man, then it's only self-interest. So it's like part of it's how do you get this how do you get this idea of self-interest out of the hands of the right? How do you get I'm very interested in how do I get maybe liberty, the word is too fucked already.
Oh yeah, it's probably fucked.
It's too fucked. We need a how do you take it away from them? I just want to grab it. I want to grab it from the right, and I want to just give it to the people that need it. That will break the people that are trying to squish them.
I think we're starting to see that. I mean, we really are, and this is compared to where Stirner's literature and the ideas of egoism and everything like that, we really are in a sort of renaissance for it right now. And a lot of people are reading it and realizing that we have been fed a false dichotomy our entire lives. We've been taught that there's the community and there's the individual, and they're totally different and their interests never coincide. And that's not true. In fact, the majority of people, very few people want to live alone in the middle of fucking nowhere with no other people around them. There's a reason that solitary confinement is seen as a method of torture. We're social creatures. So the idea is that we can have both. There's no reason that our community can't uplift us as individuals, or our individualism can't add to the community. We're sort of this is new ground that's being broken in leftist circles and discussions as we speak. This is something totally new. As for how to bring it out, I think the only way you're going to is to have conversations like this. And also one of the things is I find particularly liberating, and again, Stirner's concept of the unique, to explain to people that, look, you're not just a worker. You're not just whatever your gender is. You're not just anything like that. You are unique. There will never, ever, ever be anyone like you. You are a universe unto yourself. And that universe is worth something. You fucking matter. You don't matter because of what your economic class is, or what part of the country you're born in, or anything like that. You matter as an individual with this beautiful transcendent self that needs to be cultivated. Explain to people, like, really, what do you want to get out of the revolution? Shouldn't it mean something to you? And you'll find a lot of times in these socialist revolutions where it's always for the working class and communism, some far off thing. Sure, living conditions are a little bit better, but it never really changes to the point where the workers are no longer workers. And that's the real question that's being asked now is, look, do we want to essentially remain where we are, or do we want something better? There's a very, very large amount of very radical dreaming going on across the world, and especially in the American left. I think that a lot of people, to go back into Christian morality, they're trading out one master for another, so they flock to parties like, the Party for Socialism and Liberation. They think that the best use of their time is trying to convince your average American that Stalin was a fantastic, wonderful man. And those people are going to do that because they're essentially trading out one church for another. These are the people who have a crisis of faith as Baptists and become Catholics. They're not happy with their current church. They want a fucking new one.
You know what you said? You said something that reminded me of Baudrillard. So the guy who talks about the hyperreal, and it's sort of the antithesis to the idea of people becoming their symbols, or people identifying with these things that aren't them, that there is actually a person that you can talk to. Like, you can look at a person and and it's not like they're not the conglomeration of their symbols. There's like a person, It's like, oh, it's hot, it's like 100 degrees in LA. So it's
I have a gigantic spectral hole under here is what it is.
Nice.
That's less of a person and more of like a universal force with like alligator fangs and shit like that.
But the point is, what you were saying is, how do you break past these sort of symbolic fictions, and how do you talk to another person about something like this, about becoming something that is for itself, that is for themselves, right?
I go ahead.
And I think one of the things that people need to learn how to do, and this might sound like a little too California, but it's true. It's true. It's you need to somehow the ability to talk with somebody, to look at somebody, and then you're getting a little bit of the symbolic fiction, and that's what you got, and you get these sort of vagaries, and then you sort of, at some point in that dialogue, you start to talk to a person.
Yep.
And what you were saying, even me sort of, you're not doing anyone a favor by idealizing them necessarily. You're not doing Harriet Tubman a favor by saying, oh, okay, here's the Underground Railroad, here's Harriet Tubman, isn't this a great thing, right? So I think at some point the purpose of talking with somebody is to get to that unique, or at least more so than the initial sort of, not the forbidden word archetype. It's you get kicked out of the Freud Society if you say that. So.
That's fine.
But it is an archetype in that it's a vagary. It's a generality that doesn't always get bridged. It doesn't, because people don't know how to look at the unique.
I think this fits in sort of with what the Gnostics are saying. I think it is, you had an interesting sort of battle in the early church. You had the people that believed salvation was found through faith, and you had a group of people that believed salvation was found through knowledge, through direct experience, and that the only way people were really going to learn about the divine mysteries was from literally experiencing them, not reading them in a book, not seeing them somewhere else, but being a part of them. And for anyone that, sees the rampant sectarianism and everything like that on the left, it is night and fucking day when you get the fuck offline, go out and talk to people. Now, you're always going to have your assholes. There's always going to be people that are drinking the Kool-Aid by the fucking gallon. But I have found when it comes time to do actual shit, then the ideologies begin to wither, because the ideologies they're very good at putting everything in little boxes, but that's not real life. All of a sudden, you're in a real situation where it's like, hey, I'm about to get swung on. What the fuck? And all of a sudden, the ideologies did, and and it's in those moments that the real person comes through. And you see the ideological bearers and the geists and the phantasms that we've put on people drip away.
Yeah.
And it's only through that direct experience. And again, now this is interesting because, when Stirner's talking about the unions of egoists, he's not talking about something. He's not writing this book for the fucking planet. He's not writing this book for the country. In fact, Stirner's saying, look, liberate yourself as much as you can. You can't fucking save everybody. There's no way. So again, this isn't something like egoists are never going to create a step-by-step plan that the fucking United States or even the state of Florida is going to be able to follow to get to some kind of thing. It's about the people that are interested in doing it and going bit by bit, almost like the ancient mystery schools or whatever.
Yeah.
So getting that direct contact, like you said, really meeting people as human beings and learning that the ideology merely is a backseat, and then really separating even then, what is this ideology to them? Is it merely a language that allows them to understand the world better, or is it really a religion? Because, there are plenty of people, when I just did my investigation down in South Florida, here I was, an egoist communist reporter. I'm standing next to a guy that's been reading a lot of Mao. I'm standing next to a guy that's fucking running for office as a Green Party representative. And all of us are trying in any way we can to help these tenants that are being used and abused by Palm Beach County. Okay, but fucking Marxist, we didn't sit down and argue ideologically. It was about look, these people need help. They're asking for our help. What can we do? And it's about getting shit done as a unit rather than as ideological compatriots. And It's amazing how much of that just shit withers away. It's not necessary. In the same way that look at the Christian right in the United States. You've got some churches that won't fuck with one another, but when it comes time to take away a woman's right to have a fucking abortion, boom! You got Baptists lining up with Presbyterians, and you have Pentecostals bringing their snakes on down, talking about how babies are sacred until they're born, and then if they're black, fuck them, and we'll drone them and everything like that. Yeah. That kind of ability to work together. The left, for whatever reason, thinks that its ideology overrides real existence and the real self, the real human being.
Yeah.
And Stirner is saying this is what's real. Everything else is a game.
I think what people are missing is that I think the right tends to recruit people that don't have the ability to get past these ideological fictions. And, people here, they're like, oh, it's like Ayn Rand is for egoism, and then you got Stirner, and it's very similar. But the crucial difference is the people. Who are these people that that are past the ideological fictions. And like you're saying, it's like, oh, the Christian sort of right-wing populists, they don't have a problem coming together to stop women from having abortions. And I think you got to look at what are they doing? They're like coming together to like, you know, get rid of taxes for the fucking like 1% or whatever. So it's like you could look at the ideologies and be like, oh, they're very similar, but then you ultimately you need to have the ability to sort of break them, and then you know, and then it's like, okay, you have a bunch of ideological, you know, bullshit.
That's essentially what it is. Yes, that's exactly what it is.
And you throw that aside a bit, and then you say, okay, what exactly am I going to do? What exactly does the unique that is me going to do? And you can, you know, you could talk egoism all you want, but then it's like, what do you do with it? Are you going to develop a skill and then maybe, you know, help people in your sort of local area with that skill? You know, are you going to go down a Skid Row and fucking wade through some shit and fucking help some people? Are you gonna go into an office building in fucking Beverly Hills, and are you going to you know, talk with rich business people to make them feel less bad about their affairs or whatever? So so there's like a big difference. The problem with the symbolic fictions is it does miss the unique. And then getting to the unique is so, I think, difficult for people, because we have a lot of language, but then it's like you gotta somehow get through. Through the language. And the last thing is, you know, I'm sad I can't find the quote in here, but Baudrillard has a great antithesis to Hegel, although Hegel's important. He says, reality is not dialectical. And what he means by that is the dialectic is a process and a becoming and sort of, but ultimately the dialectics are to get to the essence of the thing, which is not the same thing as that dialectic, you know. And I think people get caught up in the process, and they forget the reason for the process. And the reason for the process is that essential quality, or another way to look at it is what does the unique become? What does the unique do? What are you doing as the unique? You know, it's not like you were saying, you're standing next to, you know, Maoists or Marxists and Green Party candidates, and, you know, on the internet they'll all fucking yell at each other. But then it's like you're getting together and you're doing something, right? Fuck. I don't think I have a question. What's the question?
Well, I mean, I definitely agree on the dialectic thing, because, like, look, I am continually amazed that people think this isn't any more than, you know, a perceptual tool. You know, again, to quote Robert Anton Wilson, the map is not the territory, plain and simple. However, you are, I don't give a fuck what you think reality is. It is coming from a very, very limited set of tools and perception. The sheer fact that eyewitness testimony is notoriously inaccurate. Your literal eyes will lie, okay? God, so many cases like that. So this is the kind of wetware that we're dealing with, that essentially, you know, so these people that think that their ideological toolbox that only lives up here is somehow as real as they are, whoo, that is some straight up hardcore Baptist and believing shit. But as for the whole, you know, unique thing, one thing that you were talking about that I think could be said even better is, what does the unique want? What is your desire?
Yeah.
What is really your desire? Not what is the newspapers that you've been reading's desires, not what your boss's desire is, not what Shay's desire was. What is your desire? What do you want as an individual? as a totally unique universe on yourself. What do you want?
Yeah.
And Stirner says, come to that, analyze it, be critical. That's another very important thing, is to analyze, is this really me talking? Is this something else within me? And then go out and take it. And don't fall for the bullshit of laws or rights or morality, because all of those are in your head. And a lot of those things have been given to you to keep you weak and complacent and in a place of negative power. So find the unique, the inexhaustible one, analyze your desires, and then go out and take them.
Yeah. A union. Oh, see, we bring it back.
There you go.
A union isn't a symbolic union always. I think one of the problems with these symbols is they're really effective for certain things and really ineffective for other things. So you can create a sort of, a symbolic framework for reality. So you can have like reality, this bowl of pistache, whatever, doesn't matter. So, and then you could create a framework for it that will allow me to do things with it, right? And in that way, symbols are very useful. And I think where people go wrong is they go, oh, I have this, oh, I can do this sort of symbol thing. Wow, that's kind of neat. And they sort of, they think the strategy is the ends, and is not.
Absolutely.
Yeah, or they get into, I don't know, these.
They start believing their own bullshit is what it is. Symbols have power. Let's be very, very real, especially as an occultist. Yes, symbols have power. Symbols are real. But symbols are real in a certain way. And when we take symbols as the only real thing, that's when we start to get fucked up. Symbols are great as emotional gravity wells. Symbols allow us to direct our emotions towards a certain thing and feel a certain way. That's what they're great for. I mean, and no amount of, we need that. Symbols create context. A dead child is a dead child, but a dead child that has a drone flying overhead with an American flag on it, that's power. That resonates within people. Look at the picture of that drowned Syrian child, right? That blew up. Some of the images of, black men being executed by police officers in the street. These are real things that happened, yes, but when they become sort of mythologized, people, they become this battery of energy. Yeah. But the important thing is, while these symbols allow us to take part in that energy, we can't forget that it's a battery, and it has to actually go out into something. And so unions, they allow us to feel good about something. Oh, we're the workers. We're given an identity. Oh yeah, we're local 264. People get tattoos and T-shirts. It creates an identity, something that people can believe in, something that's bigger than themselves, that they can share in its victories. And while that's good, we can't forget that at the end of the day, that union is made up of individual people. That if you kill all the individual people, the union disappears. If you kill the union, those people are still there. A great word for this is what an egoist critique of unions essentially is. Unions are great as long as it's a ludic belief. As long as it's done with the idea that, like, hey, let's all just keep in mind this is just a tool for us to use. It doesn't rule over us. We can change it at any time we want. And the minute it no longer becomes useful for us, we should do something else. That's all. Like Stirner said, he's not against love, he's against sacred love. He's not against socialism, he's against sacred socialism. He's not against unions, he's against sacred unions. When your union tells you not to strike, when your wages are getting fucked, you have a direct conflict between your actual lived unique self and its self-interests and this metaphysical being that you've uploaded all this emotional energy to. Yeah. And the minute that being starts to rule your lives, you're not really a human being anymore. You're just a puppet. Yeah.
So I think the last thing I want to ask about. Oh, I'm hearing feedback. Oh, there it went away. Okay. So the last thing I wanted to ask about relates to what you're saying. There's a guy named Alfie Bone, and he writes about the gamification of the world is sort of a capitalist tool, and it's sort of we're stuck. And my publisher is, you know, Zero Books or whatever. They're very much they're like yeah, this is true. We're stuck in the capitalist gamification of reality, but you know, I have a very big problem with that. And the problem is, like you said, people are invested in symbols like the union symbols, and I think there's a point to, like, yeah, you are not the game, right? And then I think there's the point where it gets too far into the sacred, and that point where it slips is like, oh, now we're not playing any games, now we're just, okay, great. So now you don't have that worker network, now you don't have any of that, because that's all strategic sort of planning, right? So I'm gonna throw you a real California fucking, I don't know, it's might not be a softball because it's so soft, it's like, but it's like, how
a wiffle ball?
yeah, it's fucking, I'll throw you a wiffle ball. How do we merge the strategies and all that with who we are? Or in another way is like, how does the unique survive the game, right? How does the game and the unique, how do they interact? How does the strategy, how do we not lose ourselves? And how do we not lose what we want? And I think the problem is, people say, oh, the politics of desire and politics are separate, but you know, no, I don't buy that. And that's, I think, Zizek's point, and a lot of other people's point who care about psychoanalysis and politics. So the game, the unique. What do you think?
I think to sum it up would be to be as authentic as possible, to remain rooted in your power as an individual, to remain rooted in oneself, and to act authentically. You know, these geists, these phantasms that run around in our head and tell us what we need to do and what we need to believe in, the state, the nation, the society, the people. All of these are designed to make you feel certain ways, whether it's guilt, whether it's pride, everything like that. But when our power comes from within ourselves and we remain authentic to ourselves and we act how we are truly and seek to cultivate that, a sort of very Zen thing, you know, and break through that. It's a process. No one's saying that you're going to be this sort of enlightened whatever, you know, in a couple of days. It's a process. It certainly takes work to, like, sort of unpack some of the things, like, wow, why do I think this way? Why have I been treated this way? You know, to sort of, let's give a historical example, and I think we may have covered it here before because I've used it often. Back in the 1920s and the 1930s in Alabama, Bolshevism was taking off among black folks that were being terrorized by the Klan. I mean, these people were passing around newspapers that were from the Communist Party. People were buying guns. Shit was really starting to pop off. It was so large, in fact, that the Soviet Union actually issued a statement saying that they believed that the Black Belt in the United States constituted its own nation, that was an oppressed nation, and that if the Communist Revolution was to ever come to the United States, that the Black Belt would have its own national sovereignty. Again, 1920s, 1930s, this is, you know, very popular. These people are building a network. They're getting armed. They're making their desires heard. All these organizers are, you know, direct Communist Party members. A moment came during World War II. The Soviet Union needed the United States to help fight the Nazis. Obviously, the United States could not deal with all this subterfuge and everything like that in the name of racial equality. So the call went out from the Communist Party, who was following the orders of Moscow, that they needed to stop talking about segregation, stop talking about the Klan killing them, and direct all their efforts towards a popular front. So these communist parties went from educating people, arming people, preparing for an eventual insurrection, running for office, to throwing a whole bunch of fucking parades and collecting war bond money and shit like that to keep the United States in the war. Now, if those people had not been spooked by the symbol of the Communist Party, if they had realized it was a regular organization made up of regular people with their own self-interests, that maybe the self-interest of the Communist Party was not in their interest, just like many of these unions that we talked about today, They could have said, you know what? I understand that it is in Russia's self-interest to keep the United States in the war, but right now, these people are being lynched on a day-to-day fucking business. They are being kept in shacks. They are being kept poor. Our war is here. This is what we're going to continue to fight. And they could have done their own thing if they had remained authentic to themselves, if they had looked at the world around them as an individual. As an individual. Not necessarily was the Eastern Front very important, of course. But god damn it, there were people being fucking murdered every day in Alabama. Every fucking day. Terribly tortured, burned alive, having their legs sawn off. And they were told to put that on hold for somebody else's self-interest. So the question becomes remaining authentic to oneself and what one desires. If you desire an end to racial terrorism and white supremacy, then no, you're not going to stop. You've got to remain authentic to that. And if they had done that, there's a very real possibility there could have been a red insurrection in Alabama. Unfortunately, history didn't go that way. And immediately after World War II, everything fell apart. And it's another wasted opportunity due to sacred symbolism.
On that note, Dr. Bones, let's go out on that note.